is there a framework to address trade-off questions? Okay, so let's start with that one. I'll take a stab. So yes, the template that we covered, my analytical thinking template does have a framework for addressing trade-off questions, and I will summarize it very, very succinctly because I did talk about it a bit in our lecture, but I also talked about it in the pre-work for the lecture. But the fundamental framework for the trade-off is to start by clarifying what the trade-off is. So make sure you're clear. It's generally going to boil down to, are you going to do A or are you going to do B? Okay. I mentioned I mentioned in the student portal, sorry, that and a lot of you reacted with like hearts and fire and stuff, which is great signal for me that that's valuable stuff to just incorporate up front and not share it later. But basically the 5 different types of trade-off questions that you can encounter, something I put together just by looking at a lot of the questions and figuring out what came up in Q&A over time. So basically the 5 categories of trade-off questions are breadth versus depth. So in this case, A versus B is, do you want like more of something that go shallower, so less deep, or do you want less of something that goes deeper? Okay, so like for reels, do you want to have 100 reels that have 1 million views, or do you want to have 1 million reels that each have 100 views? Those kind of questions. That's like the first category. The second one is real estate prioritization. So here you're gonna A versus B is gonna end up being something like there's a limited piece of real estate at the top of the Instagram app. Should we put reels at the top of the Instagram app, or should it still be stories? Okay, so A is reels at the top, B is stories at the top. Okay, the third category is going to be required versus optional features trade-offs. So here, basically, you're going to be given a situation where there's something like, for example, like the sign-up flow for Facebook. There's a profile photo upload step that is mandatory. Should it be mandatory or should it be optional? So that A versus B. The fourth category, ship or don't ship. So ship or don't ship. Basically, here you're gonna have to make a decision. You've got a product review next week with the CEO of the company. You've been running a test. The test shows that this new treatment that you shipped to 10% of users reduces the comments, but it increases reactions on posts in the feed. Like, do you roll it out to everyone or not? Right. So it's like that kind of trade-off, A or B. And then the last category is killing something or keeping it alive. I think it's a little less common, and you could argue it's kind of a flavor of keeping it optional or making it mandatory. But here you might need to, you might get asked a question around like, should we kill this feature that has low usage but high satisfaction amongst people using it? That kind of question. So A is kill it, B is keep it. So basically, once you have the clear sense of which of these trade-off questions you're being asked, then the question is, well, what's the framework for thinking through the trade-off questions? So my framework starts by clarifying what that trade-off is, trying to figure out what the common goal or mission that both of the options contribute to. So trying to kind of trace A and B up to like a common branch where they meet, or if you want to use a tree analogy, down to a common branch, something like that. And then figure out what they have in common. So create that apples to apples comparison. And then I like to frame, if you have time, pros and cons of going with each one. But if you have limited time, just the primary pros of each option. So why is A awesome? Or why is A really well aligned with the goals we talked about earlier, or the North Star metric, or the mission of the product? Why is B aligned with the North Star metric or the mission of the product? Try to kind of like really make a steelman argument for why A is the right idea, and then why is B the right idea, and then boil it down to the crux of like what the fundamental trade-off is. So like, what's the best thing A has going for it, and like what's the best thing B has going for it, and then considering the downsides of each of them. That's basically the decision. You just need to make a decision. Like, I would go with this for this reason. Okay. The reason could be tied to, ideally, the goal that we set earlier in the exercise, the North Star metrics that we set, the North Star metric rather, that we set earlier in the exercise, and the mission that we set earlier in the exercise. So basically, if A or B ticks the box on all three of those really well, then that's the one I would go with. Um, and if you don't have a perfect fit, like if neither A nor B kind of have a really clear through line across all three of those things, then take a best stab at which one's most aligned either with the mission or the strategic positioning of the company and what matters to the company. And the key here is to also share your rationale for what would make you change your mind. So I think the reason I really like finishing trade-off decisions with what would make me change my mind is because you're telling the interviewer, I'm not dogmatic. If I'm wrong about any of these key assumptions that I used in my thinking, then when I prove myself wrong through real data and through real evidence, then I will reverse how I feel about this. So basically, I'm very disciplined in how I'm thinking. Here's my decision. I'm decisive, but I'm also adaptable.